Skychild'lon, I welcome you once more to the library, and hope you enjoy this brief look into a hero of the realms, a man born to fates he could never have planned for, and the crafter of some of those very fates. As you well know by now, this will just be a brief introduction and overview of this hero and god of the realms. In this, our fifth entry in our Divine Discussions, an Intro to the Realms mini-series. I am, as always, the Recorder, and I thank you for joining me today. There are those born under the star of fate. There are those doomed by the very circumstances of their birth to be made a piece on the great game board of the realms and her shifting futures. The subject of today's entry is such a man that by his very birth was unavoidably set on a road that would see his own death and resurrection, the creation of artifacts, and the birth of a new god by most unexpected and unplanned means. That man is known today as Ordis Skychild'lon, Lord of the Reliquary, Great Maker of the Cognati, Wielder of the Hammer of Judgment, among other titles, some far less flattering, such as the Doom of Worlds or Wormsbane. Regardless of what titles he would gain, he was simply born Ordis of Criterion, a fresh spark, newly birthed by the force of the Omni-Mind itself, born fully grown as all fresh sparks are. His creation caused quite the commotion in the ranks of those that were aware of it. You see, Ordis was, and still remains, the only Christon Analar, and not only looked as they do, but wielded the same fraction of grace that a ground-bound Analar would, manifesting as a natural, shape-shifting talent. How the Omni-Mind was able to manage this is just one of several mysteries surrounding Ordis that still have no answer. Ordis' first century of life has little of note beyond his service in the Criterion Civil Militia, where he was selected for and trained as a mecher. Unlike the more famous of the mechers, Ordis was not a warrior, but instead he chose to become a hazardous environmental engineer, repairing craft in combat or in situations that were beyond normal engineering crew, with the aid of his mech suit, as well as for rescue operations in similar situations. He served in those relatively peaceful times quite well, and when discharged after his fourth term of service, was already becoming a wonderkin of construction and craft. After his discharge, the tides of fate first exerted their pull, and he found himself, along with others, pulled into the core events of what became known as the Great Tempest of Scales, that saw one of the great dragon gods laid low by internal treachery and a near return to the days of the wars of feather and scale, if not for Ordis, his companions, and the intervention at the guidance of the higher powers. During those trials that ensued, Ordis would see himself create several of the artifacts that he is best known for, the Hammer of Judgment and the Reliquary, along with the continual improvement of his own mech suit. They had also been inducted for the Hunters for quite some time at this point, and furthermore into its shadowy Internal Intelligence Division. At the climax of these trials, Ordis met his death for the first time, as he had his heart torn from his chest by the great traitor worm that had started this whole affair. He had just cleared out the last of the she-dragon servants from protecting her from their oncoming wrath, only for her to coldly and callously strike him down in a single blow after watching him slay over a dozen of her chief lieutenants. That was not the end of Ordis, of course, for the Empress of the Gods herself plucked his soul from the ether and applauded his efforts, before returning him to his body, just in time to see the death of the she-traitor dragon at the hands of Ordis's best friend, the pacifist healer Riften. Seeing the rage and pain on Riften's face, as he still held the beating heart of the would-be draconic god in his hands, Ordis swore that day was the last time death would ever touch him. In the direct aftermath of these events, Ordis saw the completion of the reliquary and its true purpose be revealed to the wise and the divine. The massive, square, slightly tapering construct, over 100 foot tall, with 300 foot to the side at the base and 200 aside at the top, with walls 13 feet thick on the outside. It is a flying building that is far more than a mobile home or base. It is one of the most potent and secure containment facilities in all of the realms, capable of holding even gods. Each of the dozens of rooms became their own mini planes of existence that were much larger than the rooms that held them. With the stresses being placed on the structure by the mismatch in reality being transmuted via secrets that are Ordis's alone into a viscous, gel-like substance that removes anything subsumed in it from the passage and effects of time, freezing them still and unmoving or thinking, unaware of anything at all until the gel is cleansed from their bodies. This liquid is pumped around the reliquary via the great heart of the reliquary, a 1-to-1 living metal copy of the heart of that she-dragon that killed him, while her actual heart beats within Ordis's own breast, placed there via the great skill and magic of his friend Riften. So long as one of the two hearts beats, so too will the other. And thus, Ordis enjoys a near unbreakable tether to the lands of the living, so long as the reliquary exists. This, among several other quirks and features of the reliquary, make it the go-to place for the securement of dangerous items or persons, for as long as it is needed. Its mobile nature and heavy design make it a fearsome goal to attempt to breach, even for those that know of its existence as something more than the flying home of an eccentric war hero. Thus, there have been no known attempts, as the tales of the wonders contained also make note of the magics and other means that would have to exist to keep such a collection safe, both from outside as well as internal threats. Ordis would continue to see his star rise within the Hunters as well, seeing himself promoted to a secret division within the secret division, as well as being made the quartermaster and keeper of those things the Hunters had no other recourse for. He is, as so far can be inferred, the head and master of this hidden group. And while he will have had to recruit talent at some point, no records that I have been able to find as to who or when they might have been recruited seem to exist. In the public eye, things were a bit different, as Ordis found himself being rewarded with nobility and title, from not one, but two different noble houses. The first, that of the Criterion Royal House of Skychild, which is not that great of shock as a reward for a Christon who had just saved the world, perhaps, and that of House Olon of the Analar, which was indeed a shock to those unfamiliar with the internal political games of the Analar, particularly the tendency for House Alon to complicate the affairs of state for no other reason than their own amusement. The induction of an artificial Analar to the nobility of the Analar, and by one of the great and original houses no less, accomplished this aim quite nicely. With his status as a hero of the realms, as well as the clear proof that he did indeed possess the grace of an Analar, as well as the endorsement of several figures behind the scenes, the offer was not countered by any with the power or clout to do so. As is apparent, he accepted each house's offer, and was known then on with the surname Skychild'lon, now a noble of a high house in two separate nations, both of which recognized the rank of the other as well. What happened next for both Ordis and the realms was the beginning of the Age of Stars, and the lead-up to the Scriptorum conflict, where the Hunters Company, Extreme Prejudice, discovered, cleared, and then successfully claimed what would become known as the Ego Nebula. During these events, Ordis was mostly in a supporting role, as he had worked with this Hunters Company with and without their knowledge for quite some time. This changed when a life and reality-consuming meta-bioweapon was unleashed in the final acts of those days. A last-ditch attempt to bring the growth of the realms to a screeching halt by rendering entire worlds dead. Ordis bodily took on the weapon, absorbing it within himself, employing his shape and form shifting and the growing power of his grace to stay ahead of the vile Armageddon that was trying to tear its way through and out of him every second. That battle continues to this day, as the weapon cannot be destroyed or otherwise neutralized in any fashion yet discovered, and as such, Ordis has been forbidden from ever being present on the home realm by the Empress of the Gods herself, to prevent a disaster should he somehow become compromised with its containment. This resulted in his near total withdrawal into the halls and planes of the reliquary, and his focus on his next great feat. You see, he wanted to do more for the realms, beyond the service and duties he already held. Thus, he created the Cognati, and alone knows the secrets of their nature and of Cogspace itself. However, the seeds of what would become the Cognati needed very special conditions to be born and nurtured into. How this was achieved remains one of the other great mysteries in the realms, as somehow the proto-mass material that would become the Cognati is known by the Cognati's own accounting to have been placed in the Cave of Containment under the sands of the Isle of Mist, sometime before the Great Four of the Analar were imprisoned there by Tag-Alon. This would have been several ages before Ordis' own birth, and as he is not noted to have temporal abilities of any kind, how he managed the feat is still completely unknown. Feeding off the residual emissions of the Great Four who were subsequently sealed within the cave, who were just as infused with their own celestial elemental powers then as they are to this day, Ordis' creations evolved and became the beings we know today as the Cognati. When the Cognati were discovered by the Hunters of Extreme Prejudice early in their career, some thousands of years later, it is unknown where they had come from or who had created them. Until sometime after the events of the Ego Nebula incident, this mystery remained unsolved. However, eventually, it became known to those among the gods and their circles that Ordis was in fact the great maker that the Cognati worshipped, and had worshipped for all the ages during their growth and evolution. Ordis had not anticipated this occurring, or the logical ramifications, and was most thoroughly caught off guard as the ripples of the temporal meddling that first managed to place the proto-Cognati in their place of birth finally caught up to Ordis, and he was now made aware of the fact that he was now, and always was, a god. So mighty and pure was the worship and the reverence for the great maker, and so subtle and tightly woven the new truth of his divinity in the pattern of reality now rewritten. This, of course, elevated his status further among those aware of the change, and of his duties, but didn't change the essence of them or him. He is still the man you call when something needs to be kept safe and away from all eyes, for potentially all of time. His great hammer of judgment, a type of analog megaweapon commonly called a mountain sledge, is capable of sending foes directly into the storage systems of the reliquary. With his continuing instruction from the head of House Alon, Raz Alon, the Grand Master of the megaweapons himself, ensures he wields it with a level of skill that is rare even for the NLR. Also receiving instruction and training from the eldest of House Alon, Tag Alon, to better understand and control not only his grace, but the nature of the eternal war that he fights to control the death that is now a part of him. He is easily counted in the top rungs of combatants within the realms, even if, for many, he is seen as a man of crafts, luxuries, and a great hero, as only the wise are aware of his place as the god of the Cognati, or of his divinity at all. With the common perception of the reliquary being that it is Ordis's personal museum containing many rare and exotic things from his adventures, it is assumed such a collection would have some objects of a dangerous nature, thus allowing Ordis to appear as a strange, exotic collector and eclectic personality, often seen to be active in the various auction house circuits across the realms, when not out adventuring to add to his museum. He uses a projected body double to make appearances on Jam'mar itself, as to not violate Her Majesty's prohibition on his physical presence there, and to maintain a presence in those circles that are likely to stumble on powerful and dangerous artifacts, as well as to sell the various items that are no longer needing containment, such as a blade that was once wildly powerful due to a bound being in it that would corrupt all, after it's blessed and purified, rendering it no longer a threat, and thus safe to sell. Thus, he is seen as the immortal collector, and most accept this on the face of it, that he is nothing but a great hero enjoying a greater retirement as reward for his deeds. This reputation, and his status as immortal, endures even today for the vast majority of the realms. And this is where we find Ordis in the current day, still serving the realms and guiding the Cognati, while keeping safe the realms from all those monsters and dreaded artifacts that would bring devastation and misery to the world, but can't be destroyed for whatever reason. And with this brief look at Ordis Skychild'lon, a hero of the realm, an accidental divine keeper and creator, at its end, I want to thank you, my perceptive patrons, as always, for your time and your interest. Until I again see you in the library for another entry, thank you, and by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other.